Shalom. We move now to Psalm 123, a song of ascents. To you, enthroned in heaven, I turn my eyes. As the eyes of slaves follow their master's hand, as the eyes of a slave girl follow the hand of her mistress, so our eyes are toward the Lord our God, awaiting his favor. Show us favor, O Lord, show us favor. We have had more than enough of contempt. Long enough have we endured the scorn of the complacent, the contempt of the haughty. Very brief psalm, 4 verses in total, and it begins with the familiar introduction to this series of psalms, a song of ascents for people who are going up to Jerusalem, pilgrims who are converging upon the holy city from various places throughout the Holy Land. And then we have Elecha nasati et einai, to you enthroned in heaven, I turn my eyes. A couple of psalms earlier, Psalm 121, Esa einai el heharim, I will lift my eyes to the mountains to find out where my help will come from. And the psalmist knowing that the mountains or the forces of nature will not rise to his aid because he believes in the one God, the Creator, and he does not worship nature. So here he cuts right to the chase and gets to the heart of the matter. And he's not going to look for God in nature. He's going to look for God in Shamayim, in the heavens. And that's where he turns his eyes. And then he identifies with the slaves or the servants who are subservient to their master. He says, the eyes of the slaves follow their master's hand. The eyes of a slave girl follow the hand of her mistress. And so too, our eyes are turning towards God, hoping for God's favor. Think for a moment of the image of the hand, the master's or the mistress's hand, the Hebrew yad. Now, the yad or the hand can actually go one of two ways for the servant, towards his detriment or towards his benefit. The hand can be used to slap, to inflict punishment and harm. The hand can also be used, the hand of the master, to confer blessings and gifts and generosity. The servant is in the position of acute anxiety, not knowing whether the master will favor them or not. If the master is fair, then at least the servant has a leg up in the sense that he knows that if he messes up, the master's hand may be used to punish him. But if he does well and serves the master well, he knows that the hand will be extended in graciousness and in generosity. But the master's not always fair. And there are masters who can be capricious, unpredictable, and even evil. And in cases like that, the servant never knows what's coming up next, whether he's going to be slapped down or whether he's going to be rewarded. And that is extremely anxious. It's a tough spot to be in. At least with God, the psalmist knows that God is fair, and as the ultimate master and creator of the universe, the psalmist believes that good deeds will be rewarded and evil deeds will be requited. And so he begs God to show him favor. The problem in my mind with using this analogy in today's day and age and with the understanding that we have in our contemporary lives is that I prefer not to think of God as that master who is either going to slap me down or reward me. That to me does not instill a sense of trust and hope and faith and love. Instead, it creates in me a feeling of fear and anxiety, in the same way that a servant might fear his or her master. And that doesn't really work for me. Instead, I would rather see God as an enduring and ongoing, a continuous force and source of love and comfort in my life. When I think about God, I don't want to tremble in fear and awe and anxiety. When I think about God, I want to be bathed in the warmth of a spiritual feeling of love and of grace. That's how I would choose to relate to God. There is a common misconception among some that the God of the, quote, Old Testament, namely the Holy Scriptures, is a punishing God, whereas the God of the New Testament is a loving and a God full of grace. But that doesn't really work, because the God of the Old Testament is a God who is abundant in mercy and compassion. In the Exodus accounts where Moses asks God to show Moses God's nature, God passes before Moses figuratively and shows Moses God's mercy. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. God, a God who is merciful and compassionate. Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed, V'Emet. Slow to anger, but abundant in loving kindness and truth. And that is what the God of the Holy Scriptures is all about. Whether it is the Old Testament or the New Testament, we all worship and acknowledge that same God concept, a God of love and mercy and grace. So even though there are times where I feel like I must serve God as a servant would serve his or her master, and that indeed has its place, I prefer to do that service without any kind of fear of punishment or motivation of reward. In today's day and age, when we have often such a kind of a manipulative and utilitarian, or it's hard for me to come up with the word that really expresses an idea of just always trying to see what's in it for us whenever we decide to do something, especially something for another person. What's in it for me? What's the quid pro quo involved here? That ought not to be the motivation. The motivation is that you do a good deed, an act of loving kindness for another person, simply because it is the right thing to do, and simply because you know in your heart that if the shoe were on the other foot, you would want them to do the same thing for you in turn. Knowing all along that God somehow has God's eye on us, not in a corrective and punishing way, but in a way to show us and to illumine the path for us, so that if we go wrong, or if our motivations are only self-serving and selfish, that the light of God's presence and guidance and wisdom can kind of flash on for us and show us that there are indeed higher and better motivations for living a spiritual life of faith and goodness. Thank you.